What is up, you guys? I am back and I'm ready to start planting my 60S. John is going to be shipping his to a show sooner than this one is going to a show, so I'm actually going to take the time to plant this one fully. I got some really nice both terrestrial and aquatic plants pulled. I'm really excited about my choice of plants, and I'm excited to see how this is going to look once it's done. I already drilled in the light brackets to the back of the tank, so I'm going to be mounting a UNS Pro 60 hanging kit, and yeah, let's get into it. So to start off planting this 60S tank, I'm going to begin with some Christmas moss, and using some of our green thread, I'm just going to wrap some of this moss to the hardscape that I have. So again, I'm just taking my time and making sure that these pieces of wood that are going to be sticking out of the water are covered in this moss. And the wood's going to wick up a lot of the water from the tank and just give this moss a lot of that damp base that it's going to want to grow successfully. So that's looking really good. I think I'm just going to continue bringing this moss around my hardscape. And I think I'm going to try to tie it to all of this exposed wood that is sticking out. If there's areas that I don't need to tie it, if I can just wedge it into cracks, I'm going to be doing that instead, just because it provides a really nice natural look to the moss on this wood. So one thing to note is that it is totally normal for this moss to brown a little bit once it is adapting to an immersed environment. So I'm totally expecting a little bit of browning to happen, you know, once this tank is flooded and once this moss is getting blasted by some really bright light. But I found that after a while, after a transition period, this moss will bounce back. So I'm not too worried about that. So some of these areas really high up on this wood, like up here, I'm not going to try to put too much moss on just because I think it is going to be a bit too high out of the water to give the moss the humidity that it needs, and I'm not sure that the water is going to wick all the way up here from this driftwood. Another thing to note is that even if your green thread is showing on your woodwork, once the moss perks up, it's going to grow over the top of that thread, because I know once it adapts, it's not going to be as visible as it is now. So I think now that I'm done with my moss, I'm actually going to work my way to the back and start planting some of the terrestrial plants. And then after that, I'm going to move forward and do some of the midground and detail plants. But this is a really nice terrestrial stem plant called Persicaria. And I'm going to be planting a ton of this to fill up this entire back section here. The reason I chose this is that it will grow really tall out of this back corner of the tank. And I'm going to be mounting my light really high on this, so I want it to really grow up towards the light that I'm going to have. And the key to this plant, if you are planting it in a pond tank, is to plant it really deep. That seems to really help prevent some of the bottom leaves from drying during the adaptation stage. So I have my Persicaria fully planted in the back of my tank. I'm now going to come in and plant some detail plants in this immersed section here. So I'm just going to come in and add some color and texture variation to this back section with a lot of plants that'll grow both immersed and submersed. So it should be a really cool little transitional area between where I'm going to have all this immersed growth and then all the aquatic plants underneath. So I'm going to come in with my dwarf hairgrass, and I have already taken the gel off, and I'm just going to slowly plant it in some of the areas where I still have aqua soil exposed. So I got a couple extra little pieces of hairgrass, and I'm actually going to plant these in the submersed section of my tank. I'm not expecting these to grow too much, but I think it could add some really nice variation to the submersed section of my water. So I'm just going to be placing it around little areas in clumps, kind of, just to highlight some of the wood that I have inside of the tank. So the key focus of this tank, I definitely want to be the pond, the immersed section, but I still want to add a little bit of color to the aquatic section of this tank. If you look in nature, I feel like I normally see some of this grass and shrubbery grow from cracks in between rocks or in between woods. So that's something I'm kind of trying to replicate with my hardscape here. So I'm just taking this hairgrass in adding it to areas that I kind of want to highlight, like this cross section of this driftwood into the rhinostone. I think that's a really interesting spot, so I'm coming in and using my plants to kind of pull the eye to these interesting sections of my hardscape. I see this really nice line that my rhinostone creates, and I kind of just want to put some hairgrass there to draw your eye to the accents of this stone. So next, I'm going to come in with some Bucephalandra Ketagang Mini. And looking at this scape from the front, there are a couple sections that I kind of want to hide with these plants. In a couple areas where the waterfall foam is pretty obvious, I'm going to come in and use some of these plants to kind of hide those mistakes that I made. And just using some super glue and making sure not to completely plant the rhizome, I'm just going to tuck this Buce into the areas that I want to hide or pull the attention away from. One thing that I really like to do with Buce in my hardscapes is add it to some of the tension points that I can see from the front. A lot of times these are going to be areas where stone and wood intersects and creates some harsh shadows. So the next plant I'm going to be using is this Hydrocotyl tripartita mini. What I really like about this plant is I think it does a really good job adapting to emersed growth from submerged growth. So I'm going to use this in a lot of the little intersections in the midground, and I'm just going to kind of be wedging this into the moss. So I'm going to just look for little places that I want to add just little bits of variation. So the last plant I'm going to be using in this scape is my favorite plant of all time, Utricularia graminifolia. And what I really like about this plant in scapes that utilize pond or terrestrial areas is that it grows really well on top of moss. I just give the plants a final spray down. I'm really happy with how this tank is planted, and I think it should grow in really well. I'm going to put all the equipment on it, so I'm going to put an atomizer on, a filter on, as well as fill up this tank. And I will see you guys when I'm done. Okay, you guys, so I have all of my equipment on the 60S tank. For the filter, I decided to use a Delta 60, and we have the Aquarium Neo lily pipes on the side. I chose to go with an atomizer in the middle of my hardscape. This is gonna add a little bit of humidity. It should help keep some of the moss, some of the stem plants, and then some of the UG that I sprinkled in a bit healthier during its transition phase. Eventually, I don't know if the atomizer is going to be completely necessary once everything gets a bit more adapted to a terrestrial environment, but for now, we're going to run it for a couple of weeks just so all the plants stay healthy. For the lights, I opted for the UNS Pro Hanging Bar 60, and that fits perfectly on this 60S tank. And then for the light itself, I chose to go with an ONF. I think it'll provide as much light as all these plants are going to need. I think it should be more than enough, so I'm super stoked to see how these grow in. And that is it for this video, guys. I'm super pleased with how this 60S tank came out. I hope you enjoyed the hardscape as well as the planting of this tank. I think the equipment is doing a really good job complementing this pondscape that I ended up going with. Stay tuned, you guys, for updates on this tank, and I will see you in future videos.